Each passing year has seen our estimate of the probability of life in space increase, along with our capabilities of detecting it. More and more scientists feel that contact with other civilizations is no longer something beyond our dreams, but is a natural event in the history of mankind that will perhaps occur within the lifetime of many of us.
This is usually where I tell the audience some cool shit about science. Stuff about the brain and the spirit and the soul. It's what it means to be human. It's going to be very important within the next couple of years. Remember this.
Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name's Kane. I've got a very interesting but potentially a little bit scary episode for you guys today. So let's move right ahead. Okay, so this is an article released by Christopher Mellon on November 22nd of last year. It says, disclosure and national security. Should the US government reveal what it knows about UAP? Excuse the ads. Imagine you were just elected President of the United States. During one of your first classified briefings, you learned that the US military has recovered advanced extraterrestrial technology. You were told we've only made modest headway. What would you do in that circumstance? As President, your top priority is to keep the American people safe from all threats, both foreign and domestic. Are you going to hold a press conference revealing that aliens are visiting planet Earth, but we don't know where they're coming from, why they are here, or whether we can defend ourselves from them? It is hard to imagine any of the politicians I've worked with leaping at that opportunity. What chance would you have as president of moving forward on other vital issues on your agenda? These are questions that need to be addressed by those advocating the release of information confirming an extraterrestrial presence on Earth. This is a pressing issue. Let's go down. Strangely, there is little discussion of this critical issue among proponents of disclosure in the UAP community. Perhaps advocates of disclosure simply assume that truth and transparency are always for the better. So this is what we're going to make the subject of our video about. Should we release information, and what else is already out from To the Stars with Christopher Mellon advocating for them that we can work off and have more of a discussion. So we're going to work with some more obscure references, and then we're going to work backwards to more of Tom's open statements. That way there's a bit more meat to them. So please be patient. At first, we're going to start with this random obscure tweet from Tiny Claus. He says, this might be a stretch, but does anyone have any decent scientific analysis on the potential existence of the human soul? More specifically, why only humans and maybe a few other animals might have them? So, To the Stars has put out Secret Machines, and there's a bit of material on the human soul in them, and I haven't seen people discussing it, so let's continue forward. This is my copy of Secret Machines Gods. I've lost the dust cover, but for anyone that has it, if you look at the back, you know, it's got a intro by, I don't know what you call it, Christopher Mellon's like advocating that this book is, you know, useful for an understanding of the phenomenon. But it's quite a dense read, and there's a lot of reference material that you have to dive into to understand the full scope of the Secret Machines project. And this is one of my more favorite books. It's called Taoist Meditations and Longevity Techniques. So this is where we're going to start with our first obscure reference, and we're going to work backwards from here to try and answer Claus's question a little bit, not fully, but we're going to have some material to work with. So this is a quote from that book to put us on the right path. Essence and spirit are ultimately rooted in the energy of the blood. The arteries of the blood produce the energy of essence. When human beings die, the arteries dry up. When the arteries dry up, the energy of essence perishes. Thus, the energy of essence is found originally in the arteries in which the blood continuously flows through the body. In other words, the mind as the energy of essence ultimately resides in the blood and its channels. So let's start off with that. The potential for the soul is actually located in our blood. Now let's move on to what Tom DeLonge has said to build on this. Okay, so that quote was from this book here. I'll put a link in the description. If anyone wants to understand chapter 6 of Secret Machines, Gods, it's got heaps of material. It's a really good read. But so we're going to move on to what Tom DeLonge has said now. So we're going to start with the idea that the soul is in the blood, and that has been common knowledge in ancient China for like 5,000 years. So this is what Tom DeLonge has to say about the human genome.
I believe that the DNA molecule shoots information into the source. And our experiences and our feelings, the DNA molecule is very rare for that job. And that's why the DNA, or there's something about the genome that is desired by other life forms that don't have that power.
Okay, so hopefully this doesn't get too unsettling for anyone. We're all adults, we can handle this. That's what we keep pushing. We're saying we can handle it, so nothing in this is going to scare you. So this is American Cosmic by Diana Walsh-Pasolka. It's a pretty popular book in current ufology, and we're just going to read a few quotes from this just to back up what Tom DeLonge has been saying. So it says, I basically believe, and there is evidence for this, that our DNA is a receptor and transmitter. It works at a certain frequency, the same frequency in fact that we use to communicate with our satellites in deep space. Humans are a type of satellite in fact. So in order to receive the signals and transmit the signals, we have to tune our physical bodies and DNA. So just a little bit more evidence that potentially our DNA is like a, like Tom DeLonge said, it shoots information into the source, and that this is what the UFO phenomenon is interested in. Obviously there's not a lot of chatter about this online, so that's why I'm making this video, and hopefully it helps someone to know what they're doing with their time, whether they want to waste their time on social media all the time, or by the end of this you might have a clearer idea of what the UAP want from To the Stars perspective, and can get on with your life. If anyone hasn't seen this is called Photo 51, and it was the first photo ever taken of the DNA molecule. Now this double helix has represented itself throughout the ages, but this was the first time that it's ever been seen by the naked eye, and we confirm that DNA looks like this. I'm wondering if it's what our soul looks like, or some representation of it. I don't know. It's an interesting subject.
Is there any speculation as to what they're doing?
Resource extraction.
Okay, so he said on Joe Rogan that they're here for resource extraction, and he's also said on Fade to Black that is like our human genome that is the resource. But Tom has also posted this tweet: to understand what UFOs and their occupants want, you have to follow a linear path of study through time, biology to genetics to consciousness to the soul, and how the universe creates such. They may view a resource differently than what we know or have even yet discovered. So do we have to prove that we have a soul before we can even move on with this conversation? I'm not too sure. Okay, so we'll return back to Secret Machines Gods now, of which Christopher Mellon has put his name to. I don't see why he would put his name to this if it wasn't somewhat in the ballpark of an area of truth. So let's just highlight a few simple quotes. As Tom has said, they're here for resource extraction. He's alluded to their soul. We've sort of established that the soul is in our blood. So let's see what Tom has said about, or what To the Stars actually has put out about the UFOs wanting our blood. Now, it's not a pretty subject, and I don't know what to think of this. So let's move forward cautiously. Okay, this is from chapter 4 of Secret Machines Gods, of which I've said Christopher Mellon put his name to it, and I imagine he expected the disclosure advocates to talk about this, but it hasn't seemed to have happened. So it says the example of blood sacrifice practiced on a global scale seems to be an acknowledgement of our indebtedness to an absent creator. This creator desires our blood, or at least that is how we understand it. Our blood is not ours, it belongs to some other entity. Our blood is the divine essence, some specific encoding of our genes trapped within the weak and mortal human body, imprisoned and waiting to be released to go back home. It sounds ominous. Okay, so we're working towards a clearer picture and hopefully answering a little bit more of Claus's questions, why we have a soul and where it may be. This is another quote from Secret Machines Gods, chapter 4, and it says, blood is spirit, blood is life. More importantly, blood is of divine origin, not human. It does not belong to human beings, but partakes of the divine, the alien essence. So, read into that what you will. So we're starting to get a bit of a picture that these UAP might be interested in human blood, which is not that far to leap from cattle mutilations where all their blood's been drained out of them. So, I'm not too sure what to think. It's very hard to even imagine like a scenario where this is real. So for now, it's just quotes on a screen. I don't know what to think. I didn't want to include this quote, but it's really relevant and it's very serious. So I hope just stick it out for 4 minutes. You guys have probably seen this, but just to build on the whole resource extraction thing and just military tactics, it's probably important to get into the mindset of these people.
I'm a little more practical and probably a little bit more less optimistic for our species on this particular question. What if there was knowledge, Kurt, that was so volatile, so earth-shattering, that the mere knowledge of that getting out could predicate an action that could potentially threaten the entire species? Now, what do I mean by that? For just a moment, take off the scientific hat, take off your humanitarian hat, take off your philanthropic hat, and put on a hat of national security. We just talked about the fact that there's no indication that these things have been here to help us. Okay, so there's really only three possibilities: they're benign, or if you will, benevolent, or two, they are malevolent, they're here to hurt us, or three, they're just here to observe us, and they're capable of doing both good and bad like us. Well, if you were to put on your national security hat for a second, let's say you're a general from the 1950s or 60s, and your job is to protect America and all things good and great, and the height of the Cold War, and you've got the Soviet bear across there, and things are pretty tough, right? And nuclear proliferation is a real thing. Now, you have information that there is something here that can outperform anything you have, and really anything you have is rather ineffective from a national security perspective. And there's a thing out there, and it doesn't show that it's being benevolent. So it's only one of two other options: either malevolent or it's like us. And we see this very careful ISR surveillance of our nuclear equities. It's interested in nuclear equities. Well, some may look at that as what we call preparation for the battlefield. Okay. And let's just say hypothetically, there's a 10% chance, US has a 10% chance that these things are bad, or one day they're going to come here in force, and they're looking at us, right? Remember, you're putting on your national security hat. So forget about everything else for a moment. Your job is to be paranoid. And there's a small remote chance that these things are not good. And maybe there is a plan for these things at some point to come in force in 50 years from now. And if the mere fact you have this conversation with the American people, what's going to happen? Well, the American people are going to start getting prepared. Well, I can tell you in real life combat situations, when we send in long range surveillance LRS teams, behind enemy lines, the moment the enemy finds out that we know, that they know we're there, the element of surprise is over. And so ultimately, hypothetically, imagine a scenario where maybe we had 50 years to prepare for something, but now that the cat's out of the bag, that existential action will happen tomorrow. And by the way, we're not ready for it. We're not prepared for it. We don't have a countermeasure. We don't have a capability to counter this. And so from a very real perspective, a national security perspective, the mere fact that you are acknowledging the existence of something may predicate an action or an act that you're not prepared to have right now. And so I encourage you and your listeners to just for a moment, I'm not asking you to be a national security person, but I'm asking you to suspend your personal beliefs right now for just a moment and put yourself in somebody else's shoes who does feel that way, right? Now, what do you do? If the mere fact of talking about this could potentially cause a reaction that you're not ready for as a country, as a civilization, right? Maybe that's the reason why you decide to only brief certain presidents who have a background in intelligence. Maybe they were former directors of CIA, but the other presidents who are career politicians will be, they're here today, gone in 4 years. Maybe you can't even risk telling them. And so maybe the reason why this has been kept secret so long is actually, in a weird sense, some sort of sense of patriotism by people. And maybe that's how they justify it. And I'll leave that at that as a counterpoint of forcing people to think maybe a little bit non-traditionally. Now,
we've got a pretty strong foundation that To the Stars, Tom DeLonge, possibly Christopher Mellon are saying that the UAP are interested in our blood, and that's more or less where our soul is. Here's a quote of Tom specifically saying that they're interested in our soul, and then we're going to move on to one last final quote where it's not so clear-cut, where they're not just going to come and harvest us. It might be something even more complicated, and I hope this paints a much bigger picture of why the UFO subject is so complex and why it's just not clear-cut, why they come out and just lay it all on us. As Lewis said, they're in a chess game. They reveal their moves, something might happen to us. I'm not too sure. It seems like pure science fiction to me, but I can only put the information out there in a clear format so it helps other people.
Some of the evidence looks like there's beings that don't have, it's like maybe they don't have souls, maybe they're AI, maybe they're a different life form like an insect that grew. It's like, well, I'm not scared of a goldfish, so I leave Earth, I come back 10 billion years later, that goldfish is a T-Rex, and you're like, whoa. And then you leave Earth, then you'll go, that T-Rex is now a lot shorter, and it's like a fucking lizard dude that's telepathic and building spaceships. And you're like, it took 20 billion years, but it happened because no one fucking fucked with this planet, Right. So you can see how life just grows in a certain direction. So then you kind of wonder, well, if something grew for millions, billions of years that never had a consciousness to begin with, like a fly or something, and then now it can kind of pop over laterally into our fucking timeline, it's going to come on you like flies on dog shit. Oh, what is this? What is this? And they're just looking at you. Right. How scary would that be if you're in your bed and you got these big bug-eyed insects that are like, what are you? What is going on? And they start cutting you open, and they're like, and then all of a sudden you get scared, and they're like, that's an interesting energy. They're all, feel that. We can feel something. I can see that being the case where emotion and feeling and love is so gnarly. It's like they want to understand it. They want to have it. But what if they figure out, hypothetically, what if they figure out that that we're immortal, that our soul is part of something greater and bigger, right? And we might die and have a painful life, but we learned all our lessons, and we might reincarnate, to learn more, whatever. And they're sitting here going, if we die, we have nothing. We want that. And then what if we have those interactions and we start writing books in the Bible? It says Satan wants your soul, demons want your soul. It starts to all make a little bit more sense, right?
Okay, so Tom has, referenced Satan wanting our soul and how it could work. Obviously, we've established that the soul could very well be in our blood. And this is the very last thing that Tom has had to say. This come out in February this year and just builds on us potentially being farmed, what it could mean. I don't know any more beyond this. The Secret Machines doesn't really cover it like this. And to me, it's just okay, I just have to sit on this information and not sure what to do. They do say to meditate and pray and stuff as a form of defense. And Secret Machines Gods chapter 6 does sort of tell us maybe what we can do. I'm not too sure. I'd love more people to talk to about this, so that's why I'm making this video. Anyway, I hope you've watched all this way, and I hope you've enjoyed it, or it's food for thought at least. Please leave a comment, like. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I got plenty more like this. I've just been taking my time because, you know, I want to live my best life. I don't want to be on social media all the time, especially if this is what we're going to find out. It just doesn't make sense.
So my question is, has there been any changes in your worldview on UAPs and the phenomenon over, let's say, the last, 6 years or 10 years? And if so, what are those changes? Now, you alluded to some of them, but I want to ask you that specific question. What was Tom DeLonge, 1.0? Now we have Tom DeLonge 2.0. What's the difference?
Yeah, I think in the early days, I think there's like three major growth points in my understanding of this phenomenon, as best as I can have it. The first one was that, these things came from other planets and they might have fucked with our DNA a bit, and they want, there's a lot of stuff like ancient, like kind of historical metaphysical documents. So they're like the Sumerian texts and stuff. Like they come here for the gold, to mine gold and all this weird shit. And so I was kind of stuck in a very physical, tactile understanding. Okay, they come here from there and they want a resource. And we're slaves. Okay, cool. Then the second step was like, okay, that's not seeming how our understanding of the universe works, with the double slit experiment and consciousness and quantum physics and everything existing in parallel. These things are coming from time, and they're here because they don't share or have the same consciousness that we have. And that to them is very alluring, just like all the ancient religions say, Satan wants your soul, The third step is the latest thing that I've grown into is rapidly advancing our DNA to prepare us to be in a certain way where they can be here and inhabit the life that we have and hack the way an AI system would hack into the programming of what our soul might be, which is outside of time and space, which I think is a really interesting, and it still makes more sense to me in the sense of where, in order to make that system hackable, it has to be at a certain point in evolution of its own growth, which thus brings in way more understanding, makes way more sense why it would separate us into religions and keep us fighting and warring and feeling and emotion at such a degree that, like, it's almost like being a child and you go through, like, one of your parents pass away. That child is so much more wise and mature and damaged, than any other kid in his class, because they went through so much pain. I was meditating when I went through my divorce with my family, and I was in so much pain over that breakup. I remember I was meditating a lot, and the messages and the clarity and the pictures that would come through every once in a while they were profound, like profound philosophical growth messages that were very much like things that I've held on to this day, like 5 different times where I would be there just asking. And it's no different than when someone's praying, God, please help me, or someone's meditating and, they want answers to the universe. It's all the same mechanism. So I think in profound moments of pain and emotion, it rapidly evolves our consciousness for the good or the bad. If you do something, so there's so much pain, you might spin out, have so much PTSD that you end up shooting up a Walmart, or you go through so much pain, you grow so much that you become a spiritual teacher and walk other people through and help them heal. I think you can go other direction with this stuff. But if something's coming here, my third step, my third big growth here is that I think something has socially engineered our planet to feel an enormous amount of pain and chaos and war and strife and whatever, to rapidly advance our consciousness in the negative to where it's more hackable from an outside system, a synthetic system, an AI system, or a different form of consciousness of what we don't understand. I mean, we're already getting sentience out of AI right now. So what would happen in a million years? And we put it in some kind of a physical body that is organic, but it can think and act on its own in a certain way that we never even can imagine. But my biggest change is that's what's going on, because I kind of go, why are we always in an endless state of war? Since the dawn of man, it's like we can't stop killing each other. Well, I don't feel like we're doing that naturally. I don't feel like we're acting as humans were meant to be. If we were unperturbed in this beautiful pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan calls it, this Earth, Our natural instinct is to love and is to care and is to cherish. I remember talking to Lou Elizondo one time about what UFOs are doing as they come here and the way they interact with people. And he didn't even like really answer the question, but he goes, have you ever seen those experiments, where you put a guy in a car and they put him around a racetrack and they just have him drive, and they'll put a little bunny in front of the car and you'll swerve out of the way. He says, some people just roll right over the bunny. They'll just drive right over it. And you're like, why? Why will some people not care about life and other people just super care about life? And that's what his weird answer was to some question I asked about UFOs, them coming here. It left me up all night. I'm like, fuck, like, what are we doing with the de-evolution of mankind might have been engineered, Yeah. What's the reason why? Well, probably because then once we're not connected to all information, past, present, and future, to God, maybe we can be access to a whole set of different information. It's bad.
Can conceive of no nightmare as terrifying as establishing such communication with the so-called superior, or if you wish, advanced technology in outer space.